On this video, we will study the brush settings. By editing the settings, we create a texture brush. I have the brush selected, black paint with 100% opacity. The brush tip is round and hard. I open the brush settings from Window menu. Before, the panel was only called Brush. You can access the panel also by pressing F5. The brush settings panel looks like this. On the right you can see the brush tips. On the left you have settings on different tabs. On the left you can tick which features are on. After editing the brush, you can save it as a new brush from the bottom right. We'll start with the brush tip shape tab. It looks a lot like the brush right-click menu. First the brush tips, then the size, the roundness and angle, and when editing the round brush, its hardness. There is one important feature that cannot be accessed through the right-click menu. The spacing of the brush tip. Actually, the brush works so that it's a stamp, which stamps the brush tip shape as often as we want to. If I increase the spacing, I can see separate stamp marks. If I decrease the spacing, it will be more smooth. If your brush tip has felt bumpy, it's because of the spacing has been too high. If I want the brush stroke to be smooth, I should reduce the spacing until it looks smooth on the preview. I shouldn't go excessively low. This just takes computing power for nothing. Next we'll create a texture brush. I'll start creating the brush by selecting a brush tip that already has textured edges. This brush tip is a similar stamp, but it's just different shaped. A texturing brush has three important features: how often the brush tip is stamped, in which angle it is stamped, and where it is stamped. All of these features are edited in the brush settings menu. I'll first increase the spacing to separate the brush tip marks. Now the brush creates a stamp-like stroke. And with this kind of brush, we could start texturing. The stroke does look goofy because of the mark is always in the same angle. This feature can be changed from Shape Dynamics tab. On this tab, there's different kind of fluctuations, jitters, size jitter, angle jitter, and roundness jitter. The size jitter is controlled by pen pressure. This feature can be on the brush or forced from the second row. Now it is both. In the texture brush, the most important jitter is the angle one. If I increase the angle jitter, the brush tip starts to rotate. In 100%, it rotates 360 degrees. Doesn't look like a stiff stamp. All of the stamps are in different angles. With this kind of brush, I could create a nice textured surface. But I want the brush to do even more work for me. I don't want to have one brush stroke, but a bigger area. For this, I need the scattering tab. If I click on the name of the tab, I will open that tab and also enable that feature. On this tab, I can make the brush tip scatter. I can see from the preview how far from the line the brush tips are flying. Now the brush creates a loose area of texture. I can make the texture denser by entering the brush tip shape tab and decreasing the spacing. Now my brush creates an area of texture. This type of brush is good for basic texturing. I'll now save the brush tip as a new brush. I click on the symbol of new from the brush settings menu. In Photoshop CC 2018 onwards, there is a new feature: the possibility of including the tool settings. If this is ticked, the brush could be used only as the brush tool. You couldn't use it as an eraser, for example. It's best if you just untick the include tool settings. Then click OK. Now the brush with all of its settings is saved into the brush presets list. You should close the brush settings menu if not editing a brush tip. Now I have created a basic texture brush. This is a good brush for texturing trees or stones, for example.